All right, guys, what's going on? I got some breaking news for you in regard to the Army Combat Fitness Test, the ACFT, and all the changes that we should be seeing within 2023. I've been doing my best to stay as on top of it as I possibly can as these changes roll out. And I've come across some pretty big changes that just came out from military.com within the last couple days. And I think you're going to be pretty interested to know what they're looking at doing. And straight up right out the get-go, I can tell you that they're definitely going to be going back to gender neutral standards across the board, across the Army. They are looking at creating a completely different test for combat-related MOSs. They are looking at creating a body fat percentage waiver for those that can score high enough on these tests, which would make it so that if you do well enough on the test, regardless on how much you weigh, you won't have to get taped and it won't be held against you. And also, this seems a little unrelated to the ACFT, but I'll get into it. They're looking at creating a completely new physical standards test for the expert badges, the expert infantry badge, expert combat badge, and the expert medical badge. So there's a whole bunch of new changes that are coming down the line. I'm going to go over what this article talks about, where this information is coming from, and how we know that this is definitely going to be happening this year in 2023. All right, so those are the main topics we're going to be talking about. Let's go ahead and get into this. I want to start off with the article that I mentioned before from military.com. So this article just came out a couple days ago in 15 Feb 2023, so it's the most recent news that we have in regards to this topic. More changes are brewing for embattled Army fitness test. Changes are coming to the Army Combat Fitness Test as the service looks to comply with a law mandating it create a gender-neutral assessment by June, a continuation of the struggle over the test that was finally rolled out in October following years of delays. And they are not kidding. It has absolutely been years. I think we started rolling out the ACFT and they first started talking about it, like 2017 or 2018? Dang, this has taken a long time. Sergeant Major Michael Grinston, during an event hosted by the Association of the United States Army on Tuesday, said the service is weighing whether to use a gender-neutral version of the ACFT with a higher standard for combat armed soldiers or repurpose physical tests currently required for expert badges. So now we're hinting that there's going to be an ACFT across the board for all soldiers, gender neutral, okay? And then if you're in an MOS, a combat-related MOS, then you're going to have to take a test that is the same as what you would need to accomplish if you were going out for the expert infantry badge, for example, which is going to be a whole new test in itself, and we'll get into that. The changes are still being formulated, with some of the uncertainty driven by two competing congressional requirements built into last year's annual defense policy bill to establish gender-neutral fitness standards for combat jobs that are higher than those for non-combat jobs, while also creating gender-neutral standards for all soldiers. Now let me go ahead and show you where they got that quote from. This is from the National Defense Authorization Act that was just passed for 2023, and although it mostly goes over funding and how we're going to continue to fund the Army and things like that, it also does get into what the requirements are going to be for the physical testing standards of the Army as a whole. And one of the main bullet points that is within this NDAA is that it requires the Army to establish gender-neutral fitness standards for military occupational specialties that are higher than those for non-combat military occupational specialties. Now, obviously, this is just the main bullet point, but even with the main bullet point, it's a little subjective because it doesn't necessarily outline specifically combat-related MOSs, right? So that's already kind of an issue in my opinion, but I think that's sort of what they're getting at is what are the MOSs where the soldier, regardless of gender, is going to need to be able to perform at a higher level of fitness in order to actually accomplish their job effectively, or what's needed of them according to the Army and according to the standards outlined within their MOS. So that is a requirement that is set in place by Congress, and it's already been approved. So this has to happen by June of this year, 2023. So with that being said, we already know for sure, without a doubt, unless they rescind the NDAA, which I really doubt, that we're going to have an ACFT that's completely gender neutral across the board, across the Army, and that we're going to have another complete standard that tests at a higher standard that is still gender neutral for at least combat MOSs or MOSs that are going to be needed to be tested at a higher standard of physical fitness. Grinston also said Tuesday that the service is moving forward with a change to its body fat standards that would create waivers for soldiers who score highly on the Army Combat Fitness Test, or ACFT. Now, in my mind, and I assume there's a lot of you that would agree with me on this, there's always been issues with the body fat standards within the Army. There's been plenty of guys and gals out there that just weigh a little bit more than what the Army standard says they should weigh, but they're performing just fine or even above standard in many cases. And having to be weighed and taped is not only embarrassing, but it can be confusing because some of these people are just, they got tons of muscle and they weigh more, and it's just, why am I getting weighed and taped? You know, I'm actually doing, I thought I was doing a good thing, now I'm getting weighed and taped, what's the deal? But if they bust weight and tape, now you're looking at career limiting problems, or they might even have to be forced out of the Army or forced out of their MOS. There's a whole lot of problems that come with that. And I'm not saying this applies to everybody. There's definitely some soldiers out there that need to lose some pounds. And I'm just trying to be real. I mean, we know that's the case. There's definitely going to be soldiers that still struggle with weight issues, and they're still going to have to be disciplined accordingly, or at least come up with some sort of plan to help them in the future so they can meet those physical standards, right? However, if you can meet or surpass the physical standards that the Army has outlined for us, then you really have no business getting weighed or taped. Because I think, and obviously Sergeant Major Grinson agrees, that more than likely that soldier has no issue meeting the standards for fitness in the Army, and more than likely just has a few extra pounds of muscle or even a few extra pounds of fat, but not enough to portray an unprofessional look or an unprofessional means of performance. The Army is looking at putting in place a waiver system for soldiers who perform highly on the fitness test but might not meet the current body fat standards, a change that is expected to be finalized in March. Last year, Grinson teased the change but said it was still being worked out. At that time, he said the idea was if a soldier scored 540 on the ACFT, leaders would waive the need for a body composition test, an assessment that is meant to ensure troops are in compliance with the height and weight standards of the Army. And if you guys want a little bit more information on that, or you wanted to actually see what they're talking about here on this article, I have another video about that exact topic and that exact instance that you can watch right here when you're done with this one. That number would reflect near perfect scores in the test's 6 events, as the maximum is 600. The target for men aged 17 to 21 is running 2 miles in under 15:30 and deadlifting 280 pounds for 3 repetitions on top of the other categories. And that's fine. That was the standard that we looked at back then, but obviously these standards are going to change if we're going to gender neutral, right? But I would assume that they're still going to maintain that 540 even score, and if you can maintain a high enough standard on each of the events, then you'll earn yourself a waiver for the height and weight standards. What we found is that most people that score that don't need to be taped anyway, Grinson said Tuesday. Of course they don't. If they're performing at that high of a fitness level, then just let them do what they're doing. They're obviously able to meet the standard and surpass it. Doesn't matter. The body fat test has seen scrutiny over the last several years, including concerns raised by soldiers and experts that it is not a wholly accurate assessment of fitness and can promote eating disordered behavior in the rank and file. This is absolutely true, and this has always been one of my biggest concerns with the whole body fat percentage standards that the Army has in place for the last some years. Because a lot of soldiers out there will do crazy things, like things that are just not smart and not healthy, in order to not have to get taped or not bust weight. They don't want to have to deal with this issue, right? So they'll do things like starve themselves for weeks at a time. They'll run around in sweatsuits and just completely dehydrate themselves a couple days before a PT test. They'll take things like hydroxycut and fat burning pills that are just not good for you, period. Don't do that. And if these are soldiers that are staying in the Army for a long time and they know that they are constantly having to meet these standards, then that just means they're going to keep doing those things that they're doing and building these extremely bad habits that are going to lead to eating disorders. For men and women between 17 and 20, they cannot exceed a body fat percentage of roughly 20 to 30% respectively. And honestly, that is plenty of body fat percentage, okay? So if you're up to 20% or higher, then you need to figure out how to lose some fat. The Army has been testing out new ways to measure a soldier's body fat through body scanners, or what troops refer to as the bod pod. And if you guys didn't know about the bod pod, you didn't know about this resource, it's available to you and it's free to use, okay? Most posts, especially the big posts out there, they have I can't exactly remember what it's called, but it's the Army Health and Fitness Centers on that post, and they will have what is called a bod pod there that can accurately measure your body fat percentage, okay? And usually you have to go in there and you have to set up an appointment, and it can be like upwards to 2 or 3 weeks out. So I would advise, if you are somebody who wants to know about their body fat, or if you know you're struggling with that issue already, go over to that center and schedule yourself an appointment and see where you are actually at. And after that, they'll even set up a plan for you, a healthy plan for you on how you can get rid of some of that body fat. So that's pretty cool. We're looking at waivers for height and weight if you can score high enough on the ACFT. And I think that's a great way to implement something like that, where we've been seeing a lot of issues in the past. It's a great way to get past it and reward the soldiers that are performing at that high level of standard. Now, going back to the gender neutral points and the combat related testing. The ACFT was originally intended to be gender neutral, but the Army reversed course after early test data, first reported by military.com in 2021, which showed that nearly half of all female soldiers were failing the test. And if you were around for that, it was mostly due to the leg tuck exercise. That helped ratchet up debate during the last Congress over whether the new test was right for the service. Democrats called for a postponement of the test due to unrealistic standards for medical personnel, judge advocates, or cyber warriors. So these are your types of soldiers where their jobs don't really require a high level of fitness in order to accomplish them. Also citing high failure rates for women. Meanwhile, Republican lawmakers leveled heated criticism at gender-based testing benchmarks. The debate led to the inclusion in last year's defense policy bill of the provision requiring a new gender-neutral physical readiness standards by June. And we talked about that. That's the NDAA. So it is written into law. We have to have gender-neutral standards by June of 2023. One option, as described by Grinson, would be combat job-specific standards modeled after current tests like the Expert Infantry Badge, an assessment meant to evaluate a soldier's aptitude for combat. The EIB, Grinson said, now includes 2 total miles of running and full combat equipment, push-ups, sprints, sandbags, crawls, buddy rushes, and farmer's carries. So this is a big deal. So now they're talking about using the new test that has been rolled out for the EIB and the Expert Soldier Badge, Expert Medical Badge. They're talking about using that new physical standard test that's used during those testing periods and using that as the official Army test for those that fall within those MOSs or combat MOSs. So the MOSs that they decide to identify down the line that will use this separate test from the ACFT. It'll still be gender neutral, but it's going to be more relative to combat related MOSs. Now, I'm not really sure if this has been officially rolled out or not. I think it's still in testing phases. You guys, let me know if I'm wrong on that, if you have experience with that. I haven't noticed an official change on my end in the Army, but this is what they're talking about doing as far as a new test go for these expert badges. Now, we know that the old version for the EIB, it was 49 push-ups, 59 sit-ups, and a 4-mile run in less than 32 minutes, right? That's how the old EIB standard was. But this is going to be the new standard going forward, all right? Here's an article from the Army Times that was released late last year, so it's only a couple months old. Soldiers who want their expert badges, which are now worth more promotion points than before, so they're highly encouraged and sought after at this point if you want to get promoted, may soon have to knock out the following exercises in their full kit, including helmet, body armor, and combat boots. 1-mile run, 30 hand-release push-ups, 100-meter sprint, a farmer's carry, lifting 16 sandbags onto a platform, a high crawl, a buddy team rush, and a 1-mile run, again, to top it all off. Now, I don't know for sure if that's supposed to be all, one go, or if they're separate events where you have a break in between. Not 100% sure on that. If you guys know, please drop it in the comments, let us know. But that does sound like that can be a pretty good test for an infantryman or somebody that is working in a combat-related MOS. It also doesn't look like there's certain time standards for this. It looks like, you just got to get this done. Now, I think there must be a certain time standard for the 1-mile run, but maybe not. Maybe it's just, hey, you have to get these exercises, these tasks done completely and to standard in order to pass the test. And if that was the case, I'm not really sure how you're going to make that an Army test for record across the board for combat MOSs, because how are you going to score that? It's either a go or no go. But maybe that's a good thing. What do you guys think? Should we just have go or no go PT tests in the Army, or should it be scored? Ever since I've been in the Army, it's always been a big deal to score very high on the PT test. And that's really to get anything you want out of your career, whether you're looking at promotion, going to Army schools, other opportunities. I mean, on all the different order of merit lists that you can think of, PT test is usually the highest, the PT test score is usually the highest thing that starts that OML off, right? But what if we just change all that and we go to a go or no-go standard for a PT test? Would that be such a bad thing? Either way, it's going to be gender neutral, and whether you are male or female, those are the things that you're going to have to do if you're in a combat-related MOS. But you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, if you were to use the same tests for the expert badges as the official test for record for combat-related MOSs, what would you do when you're earning the expert badges? Or is it just you use that fitness test as a precursor? You have to pass the fitness test in order to even be eligible to do the EIB. And actually that might be a good thing, because then it's just one less thing that you have to schedule for and conduct when you're actually doing the IB. If you already have a test on record that says you can do these things, then you just move right into the events portion of the EIB or the Expert Soldier Badge or whatever themselves. That might be a good thing, right? But either way, obviously, there's still a lot more things to figure out and to work out, but we do know for certain the ACFT across the board and any fitness test that the Army comes up with across the board is going to be gender neutral no later than June of this year, 2023. And we can also expect to see waivers for height and weight. If you can perform high enough on these physical fitness tests, then you won't have to get weighed and you won't have to get taped. Still waiting on official word to see what the actual score will be in order to acquire that waiver, but we know it's coming. And I would say it's more than likely that we're going to see different testing standards for combat-related MOSs versus non-combat related MOSs, whether it's still an ACFT with different standards or they roll out a completely different PT test in general for combat-related MOSs. So that's the news, guys. That's the most up-to-date news I could find, and that's my breakdown of everything, and I hope it was relayed to you in a way where you could actually understand it, because it is extremely complicated and there's a lot of fine details to go over here. Let me know what you think about all this stuff in the comments, all right? Do you guys think this is a good thing, a bad thing? Do you think they could do better? What do you think? I just want to know what you guys think. I personally haven't determined my exact stance on all of this, but I do appreciate the fact that we have certain benchmarks now that are put in place that say, hey, no matter what, this is what needs to happen for better or worse. I think that's good. I think we need to start thinking that way, and we need to just dial this down, figure it out, and move out. And like I'm always saying, as soldiers, it's our job to take the mission, do the very best we can, and execute. So that's what I would expect from you guys, to keep training hard, keep doing the very best you can to max this thing, regardless on how it's going to eventually look like in the future. That's really all we can do. We should be doing it to the best of our abilities, because that is our responsibility as soldiers. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We push out a whole lot of good information on this channel. We talk about all things military, military information, news, career enhancement, all things fitness, whole bunch of good resources on this channel that I think you'll find useful. So make sure you like and subscribe. Don't forget to do that. And here are some examples, some other videos from the past that I think you'll find useful, and I definitely think you should go check those out when you get the chance. Besides that, I've got nothing else for you. I'll see you on the next one.